Things got so much better when the frogs arrived. Knight-errant Ezekiel leaned against the railing and took in the night air. Sure, the sounds of thousands of male frogs croaking in hope of finding a mate was hard to tune out. However, it was a far cry better than having to deal with the legions of flies and mosquitoes that had previously dominated the tropical forests surrounding Hope City. Setting his glass of mint brandy down on the railing, Ezekiel looked up into the starlit sky and let the immensity fill his mind. All of the frogs croaked up a storm. Located deep in the Periphery, there lies a little planet named Randis IV. As the second planet in its solar system, Randis IV sits in a reasonable 4.34 days dropship travel from the jump point and is described as tropical with an average temperature of 39 degrees Celsius at the equator. While it is not home to a grand menagerie of living creatures or even much in the way of mineral resources, Randis is still a fascinating example of a periphery settlement too stubborn and devoted to die out. Randis IV is located in a stellar neighborhood which has very little in the way of habitable planets. As a result, it became a hub for resupply for infrequent shipping traffic. First settled in 2988 by Earldemain Randis, the planet's population had only grown to a modest 3,000 to 5,000 by 3025. Considerably further away from the trials and tribulations of the Inner Sphere, the most significant threat to the residents was, and continues to be, piracy. Thankfully, the people of Randis IV have some help to deal with that threat. The Brotherhood of Randis is a military and quasi-religious organization created by Earldemain Randis after years of service within the Free Worlds League armed forces. He was jaded and exhausted by what he perceived as an utter pointlessness in the constant political, military adventurism of the Inner Sphere. It fostered a desire to find another way to live, and it drove Randis out into the Periphery. Like so many others who sought to build a new civilization out amongst the stars, Randis was a fan of history. He used his experience as a warrior and his understanding of how a military unit should function, and he forged an organization with the express purpose of protecting the people of Randis IV. While this certainly sounds like a noble mission, the execution left something to be desired. Heavy on rituals and tradition, the early Brotherhood of Randis seems to have neglected actual training of their grizzled and often less than capable mechwarriors that wandered out of the occasional dropship from the Inner Sphere. The process of being inducted into the Brotherhood is rife with what could be charitably described as hazing, but more realistically called sadistic abuse. Entry into the Brotherhood of Randis is an interesting process. The prospective mechwarrior will spend hours contemplating what had to be a spectacular series of life choices in the Brotherhood's chapel, before being led out to the first of 4 trials. At 5 a.m., 2 black-clad members of the Brotherhood would strip the candidate shirtless, bind their arms, and blindfold them before walking to a procession of others who waited with whips, clubs, and knots. Repeatedly, the candidate was forced to run through the gauntlet, suffering the hammer blows and stinging cracks of the whips over and over again until the endurance was proved. The next test was one of the candidate's strength. Strapped between 2 horses, the animals are then driven apart, stretching the mechwarrior between them, in what must have been quite a traumatic, if not permanently disabling process. It can last as long as an hour before the candidate is released. Any that cry out for mercy or for an end to the trial are excluded from membership in the Brotherhood. Our next challenge included carrying a 30-kilogram pack while climbing up a cliff of white chalk, climbing 90 meters to retrieve a key that would unlock a BattleTech. It's reported that many candidates fell in their attempt, which would either result in serious injury or even fatalities. You'd think this was a process for joining the Black Watch instead of what amounted to a planetary guard unit. The last challenge is both bizarre and obviously cruel. It required the mechwarrior candidate to lay on their back, while another mechwarrior piloting a griffin stood watching over the event. When called forward, the 55-ton BattleTech would lift its left leg and then very slowly place it over the candidate's body. Centimeter by centimeter, then millimeter by millimeter, the griffin's massive foot would begin to press the candidate into the ground. If there was a complaint or a cry for help, the trial would end in failure. One candidate, Patty Crail, made it up to this point of the trials and only learned of her success in the final step after waking up in the hospital surrounded by burning candles and her new red and black silk uniform. She knew for sure when she saw the steel mesh dress armor and a freshly forged swords with the markings of the Brotherhood of Randis. The result of all this questionable or downright immoral behavior was a very close-knit, if marginally capable group of mechwarriors who were big on ego and short on actual skill. Operations undertaken in the first years of the Succession Wars were complete debacles. It was bad enough that several times the whole Brotherhood danced on the line of being completely wiped out. It wasn't until the ascension of Brother Fruz in the rank of Grand Knight in 3037 did the Brotherhood start focusing more on tactics, drilling, and gunnery skills rather than late-night frat parties and creating ever more inventive ways to haze each other. Still, the Brotherhood did a fairly good job on all accounts when on the defensive against pirates who found themselves landing on Randis IV. With an actual training regime and gaining experience against pirates, by 3051 the Brotherhood of Randis could be considered an actual force to be reckoned with, or reckoned on, or near, something with reckoning going on. On the planet Antalos, the Brotherhood faced off against a much more powerful force of Fushida's Fusiliers in a fight over possession of an old Star League cache site. The Fusiliers were sent packing, and the Brotherhood traveled home with both a big win and new SLDF battlemechs from their dropship holds. For the first time, they weren't just cosplaying knights and drinking heavily, now they were cosplaying knights, drinking heavily, and fighting like actual mechwarriors. Success built upon success, and soon the Brotherhood was drawing capable mechwarriors from across the region. In late 3060, a former Smoke Jaguar Star Commander by the name Lucas Beckett made his way to Randis IV to join up. Instead of giving up his clan ways, his personality and strong leadership resulted in an infusion of clan ideas into the Brotherhood. This caused some conflict as Lucas ended up replacing Galahad Fruz as Grand Knight. Fruz didn't appreciate the early retirement from the position, and he ended up leading a sub-faction that pushed back a little bit against the adding clan-like aspects to their settlement. While this hasn't resulted in open conflict, for the good of the Brotherhood, it's worth noting that all is not tranquil within the organization. The size and composition of the military forces for the Brotherhood of Randis has fluctuated over time. It's been shown that they've been able to stand up to pressure from multiple pirate factions in the region. As many as 2 to 3 battalions of mechs are now able to patrol now on Randis IV, but also on surrounding systems. A 3073 report included some information concerning the Brotherhood's force composition, which had a mix of ancient mechs from the Succession Wars, the Rimworld's Republic mechs, and even some clan designs. You'll know a Brotherhood mech when you see one, as they paint their mechs in blue with silver trim. It's important that we take some time to talk about Randis IV because the worlds of the Periphery are often just as interesting as the people who live on them. In the Battlecore report Red Kopesh, the author describes Randis as not bad for a Periphery world, but not good for a world anyplace else. These planets far from systems with homegrown industries often have to make do with what they have and hope that the next dropship arrival has some things you need. Sometimes the time between those contacts with the rest of the galaxy are few and far between. Even things like the use of paper instead of digital documents is something visitors from the inner sphere will have to get used to. Getting by makes people tough and trains resiliency. That's what the people of Randis IV have had to become, tough and resilient. The Black Scarab attack on New Hope in 3066 was particularly destructive to the city, killing 200 people as they made a rush to claim spare parts from a water purification plant. This is telling, as the object of the raid wouldn't be considered particularly valuable or important in the inner sphere, but in the Periphery those parts could mean life and death for a settlement. I won't spoil the contents of the report, but it really does underline just how perilous one's existence can be out in the Periphery. Just a quick side note, if you're into those Periphery stories, the Battlecore Red Kopesh is a must-buy short story. It's super cheap on the Catalyst store. All available information suggests that Randis IV and the Brotherhood of Randis were able to endure the Word of Blake kerfuffle without too much trouble. There was still the usual pressure from one pirate group or another, but the Brotherhood had grown to the point where most of the small pirate players couldn't compete. The Brotherhood were publicly opposed to the Word of Blake, and this may have led to an increase in pirate activity as a result. As of 3145, the relative safety offered by the Brotherhood has led to a population boom on the planet. More than 12 million people call Randis IV home, and the future looks bright under the protection of the Brotherhood of Randis. The planet's local industries are now able to produce a range of consumer and quality of life goods, which has improved the lives of the residents. Military production is limited to some repair parts and ammunition, but with plans in the works for more advanced projects. Isn't it nice to end on a positive note? No widespread slaughter, no war crimes. How refreshing. If you're a Fiefdom of Randis fan, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to see some mechs painted up in their blue and silver. I'm tempted to do a lance of them myself. This video was a request from the comments of a previous Periphery video, so if you have another group that you think deserves some love, let me know in the comments below. Until we meet again, take care and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.